And we're live. You see, the problem I'm having is I don't see the countdown finish because the screen actually gets frozen. Great to see you guys. And hello! I'm still going to do it even though Jerry Seinfeld's a putz and a genocidal asshole and, all those wonderful things. But welcome to Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change. Jimmy Zim Zam, right on time. Of course, it is a very, very busy evening, and there is a lot to cover. And of course, our friend Max Alvarez of The Real News will be joining us soon. So, we've got a number of stories that we are going to cover. But the reason why there was no show on Thursday, just want to get you guys up to speed. Now, I don't know if there's been a really bad bug that's been going around the country, but I can tell you it was going around South Florida, and I got as sick as I have been in a very long time. At least, oh boy. In terms of throwing up, it's probably been like 6 years, I want to say. So it was really bad. It was a really rough few days recovering from this stomach flu that unfortunately I got stuck with. Hindered my ability to work. And of course, because it was so brutal for like a 12-hour period, the following day, which was Thursday, I literally couldn't get myself out of bed. So it was very tough. I only got over this like this past 2 days. So it's been a rough go of it, but the show must go on, as I say. And so here we are on Monday, and there are obviously a lot of things to cover. And yes, I know that as you guys talked about with Status Quo, Jordan did a great show today. There's a lot of very important stories going on right now. And so there are a lot of places that we could start. But one place that I really wanted to address that I just brought up to Colin, for those of you that know me personally, I have been on an anti-Diddy kick since I was in my teens. I always thought that there was something off about him. I didn't know what it was. I mean, who could know? Because you don't know the guy personally. You can only, judge by what you see from a distance. And of course, at the time, when he was caught in the New York nightclub and I was living in New Jersey, with the whole gun situation and how we made it disappear and how it was all one big joke, like how the hell was he able to get away with this? Well, when you have high people in high places, no pun intended, there are a lot of things that you can get away with. Little did we know that what he was actually getting away with was infinitely more nefarious and certainly downright hideous in so many ways. And so we're not going to play the footage of what was captured by CNN, where he physically assaulted, of what I'm sure was not the first or last time, his ex-girlfriend, Cassie, who I believe is an R&B singer, and countless other women that have reportedly said that he is abusive. And we'll get into all the other details. But what we are going to play is his confession, if you want to call it that. More like a, oops, I got caught. Now I got to address it because, what the hell? All the walls are closing in around me. But when it rains, it pours. And usually that's what happens for people that stay at the top who got there by ill-gotten means and stayed there for way too long. So we're going to play Diddy's apology.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. But sometimes you got to do that.
First of all, the fact that he still talks like he's from the street is such a joke. He's not from the street. So let me just clarify that for all of you out there who think that Diddy is like some hard gangster from the hood. He isn't. He actually grew up in a suburb in Westchester County, New York. Now, there is a bad part of the town that he lived in, and the only reason I know that is because I live there. He was raised in Mount Vernon, New York. He's not from the hood like Tupac. He's not from the hood like Biggie Smalls. He's not from the hood like Snoop or Dr. Dre or Eminem. He's not even a talent, which is always the most bizarre thing about this man. I know he wants to call himself a rapper, Sable, but I'm certainly not calling him that. What I would call him is an influencer in the truest sense. Or as he fancied himself as a somewhat of a godfather. That's kind of how he saw himself. And he acted the part to a T. And so here he is with the act being put on with the tears and the, oh man, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do this. And it's like, you did this back in 2016 and you're apologizing now for footage that came out that you thought was destroyed by the hotel that you paid off to destroy it. Now, they probably took it away, but they just put it in a safe deposit box for in case the day came along where they were going to need to present evidence of just how bad of a human you really are. And shame on them for holding it for as long as they did, but we'll continue.
I was fucked up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now.
No, you're not. In fact, what is so perplexing here is that apparently this video, which he just recorded, he's apparently in Bali. And if that's true, then why would he come back to the United States? I mean, even if they put an arrest warrant out for him, why would he come back? This is the thing about being at that level. You have an incredible ability to skate on the law. And there is no statute of limitations. There is a statute of limitations, so he cannot be prosecuted for the violent assault. But of course, that's only one of many stories that have been coming out about this man and what he has done. I grew up, as I mentioned, at a time where Diddy was coming up in terms of being a powerhouse. I never liked him. I never liked his shtick. And it's because I could tell that he was always full of shit like he is right now. He doesn't mean what he says. Again, he's just sorry he got caught. And remember, he's doing a recorded video. So whether he was prepped, coached, who knows what, but he certainly was prepared to put on a performance. And boy, oh boy, did he put on a performance. I got my tears going. I'm really, really sad. I'm sad that I hit a woman. I'm sorry I kicked a woman in the head and I bashed her brains in. I know I'm really sorry. Tony, it's great to have you here, brother. And that's 4 months doing something right. Gotta keep that going. There is nothing redeemable about Sean Combs. Nothing. I'm not going to get into any conspiracies. I have my beliefs. I think he's involved with high crimes and misdemeanors, as the saying goes. They say crime doesn't pay, but for some it does. In his case, it paid a lot. We'll continue.
I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy, and go into rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day.
You're not a man. You're a bitch. And I would call you a bitch to your face. When I was younger, I had, we'll just say, an argument with Method Man. We were at a basketball game. in the metal at the Meadowlands, the New Jersey Nets, and there was a kid who wanted his autograph. You know, he was a young kid. Young kid. Could have been, first of all, how a young kid even knows who Method Man is kind of amazing, but he couldn't have been more than 10 years old. And Method Man wasn't sitting that far away, and he wanted his attention, but he didn't get it. But when the hot honey called him and wanted his attention, you better believe he got off his ass real fast. Came running over to her to chat her up. And I didn't hesitate. I'm like, you know what, dude? This kid's been calling your name. He just wants an autograph, and he tried to give me lip. And I'm like, dude, I ain't having your shit. I don't care who you are. Don't think you're above reproach. Don't think that you are too good to address a child. You know, he's just whatever. I truly don't think there are certain people who get to a level of success, and the hip hop industry is a whole other world because of what the message. And I'm not talking about just any hip hop. I'm not talking R&B. I'm talking specifically the gangster rap community and what their message is and what they cater to and what and the audience that they try to cultivate. They try to glorify criminal behavior, and that is beyond the pale. It's something that I very, very briefly dabbled in when I was a teenager, like a lot of kids in the 90s did. But I learned very quickly, this isn't the world I want to be a part of. And I know great hip-hop when I hear it. Chronic 2001 is still the best produced hip-hop album I've ever heard. Snoop was great. Tupac's the best hip-hop artist I ever heard, followed closely by Eminem. There is talent in the craft, but the lifestyle, what it preaches, and not all of them, but in many instances, is not the life you want to live. And the life that Diddy has been espousing for the longest time, that he's been living, this fantasy life that he created for himself, which had nothing to do with his ability to make music or write lyrics or produce. Hell, Don King as a boxing promoter has got more talent for what he's done than anything Diddy can ever claim that he did. He was just in the right place at the right time. That's really all it was. He was in the right place at the right time. And he got all the glory. He rode the coattails of both Tupac and Biggie Smalls, and he dated J-Lo. All happened at the right time. All of it. In the late 90s, it just came together between 97 and 99. All of it. And yet to this day, I do question some of the things he's been involved in and what hand he had. That's all I'm going to say. We'll finish it out.
But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness.
Yes, you are.
I'm truly sorry.
Anybody that has to go through the motions and pauses and has to constantly be talking about, I'm sorry. I apologize. Forgive me. It's a script. It's not genuine. There's nothing genuine about his statement. I would hope at this point that enough people who have followed him over the years would recognize that that is the case, that there is nothing redeemable about Sean Diddy Combs at all. He is the embodiment of everything. If you can trace everything that is wrong about hip hop culture, about the most negative stereotypes about Black Americans, he is it. Everything about him, the way he talks about women, the stories about his listen, if he's gay or if he's bisexual, I don't give a shit. What I care about is the constant rumors that he sexually abuses men and boys. And that's a real freaking problem. And you can find everyone who will make an excuse and say that he was plucked from obscurity when he went to work at I think was it Empire Records? I think it was. I'm not misspeaking. I know he created Bad Boy Records with the help of Clive Davis and one other gentleman. And you could say all you want about how this came to pass. All I know is that his behavior is abhorrent, and the way that he has been able to become a billionaire. I mean, listen, credit where credit's due, if you can even say that, because I tepidly say it, because like I said, talk to my friend James from New York. He would tell you, I don't want to give any credibility or credence to that man. I despise him with every fiber of my being. But he figured out a way. He created a brand. He sold clothes like those velvet jumpsuits that had Diddy on them in purple. I did say velvet, so yeah, that's correct. But the thing about him, I mean, listen, like I said, there's nothing about Diddy that I ever liked. And you can ask my friend James, I have been on Diddy's ass since the late 90s, early 2000s. This is not a Johnny come lately type situation. I have always had it for this guy. I think he is an absolute despicable human being. I've always felt that his, like I said, his representation of Black America is the worst of the worst. And the way he sticks his nose in everything, the way that he shows up at events, the way that he puts himself in movies where he doesn't belong. I think back now to when he made an appearance in that movie Draft Day and how much I couldn't stand that. But the thing about Diddy that will always stand out the most for me is how he, in the mid to late 2000s, started peddling alcohol. And of course, he did it in the context of making it so that it had an urban context to it. Ciroc vodka. And he promoted that for all it was worth. And all he did was get on TV and show, you want to party like Diddy? Get yourself a bottle of Ciroc vodka and you'll be the life of the party. And all the while, alcohol has destroyed communities, especially communities of color, for generation after generation. And that son of a bitch has been out there for multiple decades promoting that shit. And no one ever spoke up and said, why the hell are we allowing this guy to be the spokesperson for the communities that suffer the most? All he's doing is making money off your backs. And that's all he did since the 1990s. He doesn't give a fuck about anyone but himself. And he's a no-talent shitbag who rode the talents of other people to get rich. And let me tell you, now's the time. Now the margin calls are coming because the opening is there. And listen, whether it's true or not that he had a hand in anybody leaving this earth, if you get my drift, the reputation was there. And that spoke to why so many people kept their mouths shut for so long, because in their mind, it's like, well, I can't say anything because it's not a question of me losing my career. I could lose my life. And I really don't want to go down that road. So fair enough. But now that the opening is there, there are a lot of people who are looking at it and saying, well, this is my shot. I'm taking it. And a lot of them are. The mother of his children is dead. And there is reasonable enough, what you would call circumstantial evidence, to suggest that maybe there was foul play involved and maybe he had something to do with it. Again, I don't know, and I'm not making any presumptions here, but his reputation is in the fucking shitter of the worst kind. Like I said, I've had it out for this guy forever, and he's finally going to get his day, and it's coming. Now, of course, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe his day's never going to come because, like I said, I'm pretty sure where he filmed that video, it was outside the country. That's my understanding. Why would he come back? He doesn't have, let me tell you something. The one thing about these guys, especially the ones that have gotten their money through ill-gotten means, they have got accounts set up all over the world. All over the world. You wouldn't even begin to understand this. And this is the thing that the average person doesn't understand about the rich. He could have a dozen bank accounts in another continent alone. So to suggest that he's got a plan would be an understatement. I only hope, this is my hope against all hope, is that this can set some type of precedent going forward for other people. So when you look at the abhorrent behavior, not just the stars, but the people that they hang around with and why they've been able to get away with it for so long, well, maybe now's the time to understand why they act the way that they do. The entertainment industry, whether it is in sports, whether it is in movies, whether it is in music, and probably especially music, you have to understand that it is a depraved world and there are things that go on there that you really don't want to know about. But Diddy is really, really bad. Will there be justice? Who knows? I hope, but I'm not holding my breath. Without further ado, you know why you came tonight. Of course, I know you came to hear me, but you really came to hear our friend. Because if there's anybody who has had an ear to the ground, not just in the labor movement, but also what has been going on in the neighborhoods that have been so devastated by, let's face it, the late stages and the fall of capitalism, like Baltimore, like East Palestine, Ohio, and a lot of other places in between, you know that the Real News and Max Alvarez are holding that shit down. My brother, welcome back to Generational Change on excuse me, I'll say it again. Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change. You got to get it right.
I love it. Yeah, you got this great like segment title, and then you don't use it right off the bat. This is great, man. And great to see you. I feel bad, like, you know, I gotta go after that epic rant about Diddy. I was fucking preach, brother. That was great,
bro. I'm telling you, I don't know how long you heard it, but like I said, you know, I know great hip hop when I hear it. I knew the talents back in the day, and old school hip hop was always the best. You know, Digital Underground, Tupac when he came up. I mean, again, you're in Baltimore, so you know. I mean, Tupac is the best I ever heard. I think Eminem's probably close behind. Snoop was really great early on, especially on the Chronic and obviously Doggy Style, and you know, but those days are gone. That shit doesn't exist anymore. Everything got commercialized, got bought out, and they didn't care. And I think Diddy had a lot to do with that. And you know, it's unfortunate that the best of what existed within the industry is dead, and the worst of it is still around. Now, how much longer that's going to last? I don't know.
How much longer will any of us last?
I don't know right now. And I think it's important that, you know, we have this conversation at this time because everything is kind of just collapsing at the seams. And I'm curious because, and let's lead off right with it, because I don't know what's going on in Baltimore post the bridge collapse, but I'm sure you do. So is there anything positive to report on pertaining to what did happen, how it's being handled, and where do we go from here?
Whew. Well, I mean, you know, there are some positives, but it's kind of like, you know, like given the state of the conversation that we're having, right? It can feel like a cruel joke to call it a positive amidst so much negative, but in fact, there are positives here. I mean, starting with the fact that, as we discussed previously, like this could have been a lot worse, right? You know, East Palestine, you know, I was just talking to folks about that like right before this call, including a couple residents, and they're still going through hell. Like they've been abandoned. They are still in their homes. They've been exposed to all this crap. And like they're worried that they're bioaccumulating it, which they are. They don't know what that's going to do to them. They don't know about the cancers. Like they're still stuck in this crap. And like everything we do to try to help feels like nothing, like even remotely enough to getting them what they need. And then you come to Baltimore, where, like you said, you had the goddamn bridge collapse. I just interviewed residents of South Baltimore and communities across South Baltimore, not just Curtis Bay, but Mount Winans and like, you know, just neighborhoods all in that area that are in a sacrifice zone. They are living like they have like over 70 industrial polluters in that one area. The main one is a CSX rail terminal that's been getting coal dust on everyone. Like I've driven past, when I drive to their community, I have to drive past these CSX cars just sitting there with, you know, mile upon mile of coal car filled with coal with nothing covering them. So then I go to their homes and there's black shit all in their homes and on their windowsills, and they're coughing it up and they're saying like, this is what we're living in. And then people like the guys who worked on that bridge are living in even worse situations because they are forced under the floorboards of our society, being immigrant workers, and this country being such a hellscape for working people in general, yada, yada, yada. So like you've got all that terrible stuff, and the bridge collapse felt like just another horrible thing to add to the mix. But I stress it could have actually been a lot worse, especially in terms of like the amount of containers on that ship, the Dolly, that did contain toxic chemicals. I believe Darna Noor reported there were over 50, and only like some kind of fell into the water. That had mainly like perfume and other shit, not like the battery acid. Like, again, it could have been worse, but the fact of the matter is, like, it's been taking a long time to remove that debris. It's been taking it took a long time to recover the remaining bodies in the bay. And, it's taken a long time to sort of like, reopen the port of Baltimore. And in all the while, the sort of economic ripple effects have been punishing working people, not just the folks who immediately lost their jobs in the port itself, who are now sort of coming back to work bit by bit, or hoping that there's going to be more work coming very, very soon. But all the commerce that comes from that port, which of course is again why it was such an important, port in and of itself, but also a national priority for the Biden administration to get it reopened, is because it is a major port. So, like, anyway, I'm like, maybe I'm going off the
Well,
rails.
let me ask you this, because this is important. I think this is a good point. And I've been to Baltimore as well. We all know that the only place that anybody with money cares about in Baltimore is the waterfront. What a surprise. But for the most part, the city is completely, we'll say, past the point where it needs a revamp. And that goes without saying, like,
It's being
anything.
killed. It's being throttled. Like,
Yeah.
my colleague Stephen and Taya produced an incredible documentary called Tax Broke that we released this past year. Google it, go check it out. You guys can find it online. It's a really important documentary that they produced over a number of years, showing how the city of Baltimore has been set up to fail. Like, it is one of a few like rare cities that like over 150 years ago was like constitutionally prohibited from ever expanding. So Baltimore has had a circumscribed like circle around it, and they can't expand into Baltimore County, can't expand its tax base. So it's more heavily taxes. It's like internal, like city tax base. And then as you get deindustrialization, as you get all the forces that have economically gutted Baltimore while over policing and under resourcing it's like marginalized communities, you get this sort of death cycle where the city is trying to sort of like save itself. And the only way it can think to do that, apparently, is to give these massive tax breaks to wealthy developers to build up the waterfront. And they'll make their pitch to city council saying like, oh, we're going to create jobs. We're going to help like improve blighted communities. But then you end up with the tale of two cities. Like you said, you've got the one Baltimore that working people live in, and you got the high rise gleaming on the waterfront that, like the money keeps going to. And like, this is kind of a metaphor for the whole fucking country, you would say. Like,
It is. And Baltimore is a prime example of that, because I have been to both sides of the city, and I can assure you that while there is sort of a distance between West Baltimore and obviously what goes on the waterfront, it's not like it's one block from the next. However, there is no question that within the city limits, and I'm guessing this is way above the pay grade of the mayor in terms of what the city of Baltimore can actually do at this point. But like you said, these things are designed to fail on purpose. They're not designed to benefit society as a whole. They're designed to benefit a very select few people. There's a reason why you have the Ritz-Carlton right on the waterfront. There's a reason why you have those high-end restaurants that are about $200 a plate on like a Friday or Saturday night dinner. It's done that way on purpose. This is not.
And the developers own the fucking Sun and the and the media here. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, that's not a surprise at all, because the whole concept of controlling the media apparatus is to convince people that, no, it's just, and this is why I hate liberals more than conservatives, because in their mind, it's like, no, it's just you. You're just stupid. We're fine. Everything's okay. Don't you see how wonderful the promenade and the walk around place is? You could bring your dog here. You can't afford to live here, but that's not the point. The point is it's such a feel good when you're in this area. That's always been my kind of takeaway when I see how that, kind of unfolds. And that's no different than when you had the bridge collapse down here in Florida. In the name of the island is slipping me right now, but the point is that when that bridge collapsed, DeSantis had it fixed within a weekend. When it's something that directly affects people with money, it gets done immediately. If something were to happen to the downtown area of Baltimore on the waterfront, it would be handled immediately. If something bad is going on in the working class area that runs along the interstates, that runs along where the industrial power plants are and things like that, no one cares. Because as far as they're concerned, it's like, well, they're fucked anyway. So, we'll see how long they can hang on for. And that I think is a metaphor for the country.
It is, because you're touching on something really vital here, brother. And this is like kind of, I think, like why the work that I do feels like I am like there's a noir element to it.
Transitioning into East Palestine, is that gonna?
Well, and what, even from East Palestine to Baltimore, from Boeing to BP, as I keep saying, it's like I am interviewing working people who are at these different pressure points of a decaying society, who are telling me through their stories that they've been telling me for years and telling us on the Real News, not just on my show, but on Mark Steiner's show, Mansa Musa's show, Stephen and Taya Graham's show. Like, I mean, the pain and like struggle that regular people are going through, like that is our bread and butter. We are there talking to folks at the grassroots of struggle about their lives, their struggles, how they're fighting back, and how we can be part of that change. And the reason I bring that up is that, like I told the people in East Palestine 2 months ago when I was standing in the East Palestine Country Club, having interviewed folks in that community for the entire year prior, and just finally getting out there to film for the Real News 2 months ago, I said, it's not that people have forgotten you, it's that so many people around this country feel just as forgotten as you do. I know, because I talked to so many of them. Like I told the folks in East Palestine, I was just interviewing a father in Uvalde who lost his son Uzi, at the school shooting at Robb Elementary. Like, his community feels forgotten. He feels forgotten. Remember when we were all talking about them and then we forgot? Like, that is the American condition. And the reason I thought the way you framed it was so important is because there's a diagnosis here that you can only sense if you start looking around for the signs of a society that values life so little, right? That values human life and human thriving for all of us, not just an elite, like sequestered few in their high castles. But you can see the results of a society that thinks so little of its people in the fact that that bridge was not being, like updated and sort of refortified to be better prepared for the kind
waiting to happen.
For the mega ships. Like I just interviewed with Mark Steiner, the former head of the port, the Longshore Union here in the Port of Baltimore, and he was like, the ships in my day weren't even like a third of that size. Like we've had the ships explode in the size, just like the rail cars or the rail. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. My tongue is getting ahead of my brain. We have like trains, freight trains that are 3 miles long when they used to be 1 mile long, and they have 2 people on it when they used to have 5-man crews. We have these massive shipping vessels coming in and out of our ports, only 2% of which are actually regulated by U.S. standards. The rest are all flag of convenience ships, and they're 3 times the size that they were 3 decades ago. But we haven't updated the infrastructure, like the bridge that they're passing under. Instead, what we have done is, again, disinvest in life. We have corroded like the very lifeblood of our society for the sake of profits, for the sake of short-term profits at our long-term expense. Maintaining that bridge, refortifying that bridge, that's too expensive. People will never go for it. So we're going to let it like kind of just sit there while the ships get bigger and the risks get bigger as well. The guys working on that bridge, that's a job contracted with the state. Like that should be a union job. It should be a job where the foreman at least has a direct line to emergency dispatch so that they can know to get off that bridge because a ship is about to plow into it. But they didn't, because again, over time, a society organized around profit and organized around the belittlement and disdain of human life and disdain for the notion of working people living meaningful, flourishing lives on a livable planet. Like that is so counterintuitive to a capitalist society that only sees profit and needs it no matter what, even if it destroys the rest of us, and needs to deregulate everything that the government is involved in, needs to disinvest from our public infrastructure, raid our taxes to fund more wars across the country, while our communities like East Palestine and South Baltimore are dying and being poisoned by the same companies that are exploiting us at work. Like, this is a vicious, horrible cycle that I see in the lives and stories of people who share them with me. And you start to really feel like we are all living in an active corporate crime scene, and we all need to start fighting back for real. Otherwise, we're all going to look like East Palestine. That's the way that we're all fucking going at this point. And in fact, more of us are there than we already realize, right? The concept of a sacrifice zone, really, if people have understand what that is in general, they tend to think of frontline communities right next to polluting factories. And that is kind of where it comes from. But think about the concept of what it means to essentially sacrifice the livelihoods and functioning of whole communities for the sake of industry. That's happening all across the world. That's happening all across the country. It's happening to the coastal communities that are becoming unlivable because of man-made climate change, to the desert and communities and rural communities in the southwest of this country, to communities in Cancer Alley, Louisiana, who have been getting blasted with petrochemical exhaust because of the deregulatory government environment that they've created in that state, just like South Baltimore here. So you have that, but then you also have every person on the planet poisoned by DuPont, right? The vast majority of us are already half, forever chemicals already. We're already being sacrificed. This is the way that society has set us all up. And that's the direction we're all heading in. And it's freaking me the fuck out, because I'm hearing it from different people around the country, and I'm trying to put it out there and let people know. And then, it's we're all so fucking overwhelmed. We're still trying to stop a genocide in fucking Gaza. Our political election is a shit show. It's really dire. But these are the moments in the movie when things are at their darkest. And, the Fellowship of the Ring, the whatever it is, we gotta fucking fight back. Otherwise, they're gonna take everything from us.
It's funny, the correlation between your coverage of what's going on in East Palestine and Jordan Chariton's coverage with Status Quo of what's going on in Flint, Michigan. It's just a reflection of they're just one of many. They're just one of many of these small American towns that people have forgotten about, where the same problem persists. There's still this underbelly of upper crust liberal society that still wants to pretend they don't understand the appeal of Trump and why he's so popular, especially in those parts of the country that are not on the coastlines and not in the big Midwest cities like a Chicago or a Denver or an Austin, Texas. You take those out of the equation, and it's completely lost on them that these people that live in places like East Palestine, they have no hope. They have no hope. They really feel like this country really has turned its back on me. They don't care about us. They don't care if we survive. And the biggest reason they don't care if you survive is because you are not somebody who is capable of producing capital the way that people in big cities, especially on the coastlines, can. And that is it. There is nothing more to it than that. It's all about what is your capital value to the system. And if your capital value to the system is basically nothing, and you could just be replaced like an ant on the Congo line, then that's it. You're out. Next one up, please. And that's how they see it. That is the truth. And it's really not a question of whether it's a Hillary Clinton or a Joe Biden. It would be anybody. And the same is true in the GOP. They're at least more transparent about the fact that they don't fucking care. Trump is just out there saying what he has to say because Trump's all about himself. But I at least understand the sentiment. Because like you said, this sort of working class labor uprising that we're attempting to have in this country right now, it's going to get knocked off its axis multiple times. We're grateful that we have somebody like Sean Fain leading the UAW, but that's not enough. You need to have 100 of him reproduced all over the place. You need to have people going into communities like East Palestine. Let me tell you, places like East Palestine and places like Flint, Michigan, East Palestine is red, Flint, Michigan is blue, but I can assure you, they don't give a flying fuck about either political party. What they care about is their right to life and liberty and pursuit of happiness. That they don't have right now. And the only way that's going to change is if the system changes. This system is finished. It's just a question of when people accept that it's done. Now, I think the working class is kind of like, yeah, we got to move into something else. Like what that's going to be, we're not sure. But I do think that there are a lot of people still grasping at straws, thinking that they can save this system. I don't think anybody, and I mean anybody that you talk to at this point, has come to the conclusion that we're somehow going to come out of this and things are going to be normal again. Nothing is normal anymore, and it's not going to be. The inflation crisis, the healthcare crisis, the genocide crisis, the weather crisis, everything. It's all connected. And it's almost like you're asking somebody to pull the emergency brake at this point, and no one wants to pull it. And the only reason I think it hasn't happened yet is because there's still the rats on the Titanic that thinks that they're going to get saved by a life raft. That's it. There is no other reason.
Well, can I toss me the rock, baby, again, because we're getting deep here. Like, I mean, but again, this is where it gets even darker, because you actually gave part of the answer before, is that people feel hopeless, and like we gotta like really sit and meditate on what that means. Because I gotta tell you, like, again, I got into doing these interviews with workers living in sacrifice zones. Like, I got into that through the labor reporting. I was talking to railroad workers, and that led me to East Palestine. Then East Palestine led me to Portsmouth, Ohio, where folks have been getting poisoned by a gaseous diffusion plant for 50, 60 years. That led me back to South Baltimore, again, where people were getting poisoned. That led me back to DuPont, back to BP, all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, like, but I think like what's really struck me, because this is my next book. The first book of interviews with workers I did was with workers during year 1 of COVID. The next book is going to be much bigger, and I'm going to be interviewing workers living in different sacrifice zones around the country, including East Palestine. So like this because I recognize that there's such a big problem here, and as I've been sort of preparing to do this book and continue to do this coverage, I've been watching as many like mini documentaries as I can, or old news reports as I can, you know, like going all the way back to you know, like when the fucking like, oh shit, now I'm getting all flustered. The first like site where the EPA did like the kind of Superfund industrial cleanup over in Niagara Falls, or near Niagara Falls. Like, I mean, like this shit has been going on for a long time. But what I've been hearing in people across the board, across decades, is like this horrible, heartbreaking realization for so many working people who said, I thought I loved this country. I thought this country loved me more than this. I thought this was the greatest country in the world. I thought, like, you know, I thought we're out there fighting so people could have what we have. And now my own government is telling me that my kids and I can't do shit because we're stuck here getting poisoned by a company next door, or like because like industrial waste that our neighborhood was built on is leaking up into the ground and no one told us. Like that feeling that I've heard from East Palestine to Florida to the Southwest, of people just like losing that any semblance of patriotism, any sense of belief that this is a good country anymore. Like there's something really profound in that. Because again, if we're progressives, if we're leftists, if we're trying to sort of get people to realize, if we're just not even progressive or left, if you're just people fighting for people and a good world, I don't care if you're like, if you identify as on the left, but your heart's in the right place and you know something has to change. You know, that feeling of hopelessness is really our biggest, you know, obstacle, because yeah, you're right. There are going to always be people within the system who are just never willing to admit that the system is cooked, or that, you know, like it's as bad as the rest of us know it is. They're always going to be part of the equation. But the great masses, you know, in this country, the larger sensibility, it's not just the working class. It extends actually through a lot of classes. In fact, it's a generalized sort of feeling that there's no hope anyway. Like, we are not in the driver's seat of the future, so why get worked up about it? We are just gonna have to deal with whatever future the oligarchs have in store for us. Like, that is like what I think we all like. It's not actually a given that working people or anyone across the class board is ready for a change. It's that we've more accepted that the change makers who are steering us towards ecological collapse and more war and more genocide and more inequality and more insecurity, they're not listening to us, and we don't know what to do. We have no power to stop them. So that hopelessness becomes a sort of like a drive for protection, a drive to disengage with politics, but a total collapse in faith that there is a future worth fighting for and that we have a hand in shaping it. That is a qualitative difference in society that you and I have experienced in our lifetimes, because that was not the generalized cultural sense of the future in the 1990s. So in 30 years, we have seen like this kind of like how far a society can fall and how much our faith in a future worth living in, a future where we could explore and like create our own paths and find our happiness and pursue our happiness, you know, like in whatever way that is. Now we're all just fucking trying to get by. We're trying to make it to the next day. We're trying to just sort of enjoy what we can on this ride while we all feel that like the end is somewhere near and like we have no say in how we get there. So like that's both a really exciting moment to be in, because it means that like there is the hold that the previous system had on us has waned.
Oh yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that is exciting, but also that can collapse into fascism, that can collapse into nihilism, that can collapse into so many unproductive and in fact apocalypse catalyzing ways if we don't actually come together and focus and get to people on that human to human level, so that like, you know, that again, like the folks in East Palestine know what the folks in East Baltimore are saying, right? That we are with each other. Like we're all getting screwed by this, whether we're in a blue state or a red state, a city, or whether our rural communities are being poisoned by industrial farming that's or in like pollutants like Roundup. No one's safe here. Like that's the kind of common thread here, is that we are all getting fucked. There is like, yeah, a small kind of like increasingly small window of rich communities that think that they can sort of like you know, like, I don't know, like ride out the storm that they're causing for the rest of us. But we know that's not gonna happen. And like, we are literally, we don't have time to waste. Like we are in sort of the end stages of, you know, like a time when we can really radically alter the direction we're going in. Right. I mean, like, you know, we already are going to blow past like, you know, the climate like type of warning signs that we had before. We've already we've already devastated Gaza, and like, you know, tens of thousands of people's lives and bodies and homes have been obliterated. Like the damage in so many ways is already fucking done and is so again, people's hopelessness kicks in and you start to say, well, what can I do? How can I stop this?
Well, that's a very good transition. I've been saying for the longest time that there are many reasons that this trajectory that we've been on for as long as we have has been coming. It's a long time coming, but it really, if you want to go to the origin of where it began post World War II, and it began during a period of great, what you would call middle class success in this country for about 2 decades. But when it got to the point where it became clear as to how that needed to be maintained, and we had a president that decided he wasn't going along with it, and they decided they had to kill him as a result and set an example in such a dramatic way to say, well, this is what effectively is coming for anybody else who attempts to get out of the way of what we're going to do, which is global domination, which is so ironic, because this was Hitler's plan all along with the Third Reich. And we ultimately, as a means of defeating the Nazis of World War II, decided to take his idea and basically make it our own in a different context. But it's still the same thing if you really think about it. It was American global domination in the second half of the 20th century. Now you fast forward into what accelerated it to the point of no return. You saw it begin, believe it or not, the things that happened under Reagan, that was just the appetizer. But it started there, where the reduction in the top marginal tax rate went from 72% down to 28%. So there was no balance in terms of where the rich were paying their fair share. You eliminated the Fairness Doctrine in 1987. That created the Rush Limbaughs of the world and created the alternate radio media, if you will, that grew in the heartland and the South and the upper Midwest and the Great Plains regions of the country, where people were not glued to celebrity TV and things like that. And then you usher in Desert Storm, the starting of what ultimately came, however tepidly, in George Bush's years. But it really came to a head in the Clinton years. You had NAFTA. You had normal trade relations with China.
You couldn't stop yourself, could you?
I had the crime bill. I had the Telecom Act. And of course, the creme a la creme. I had the repeal of Glass-Steagall. And that all happened under his watch. And all those domestic policies, which changed the country for the worse. Then you change the foreign policies under Bush, which was really Cheney and Rumsfeld, but it is what it is. That happened under his watch and that they put into action. That set everything in motion that led us to 2016 and an opportunity of a lifetime to change this narrative. When a small with a small state senator who came along out of nowhere and brought the topics of conversation to the table that needed to be discussed, that we were going to change this country for the better, and we had an opportunity of a lifetime to do it. And unfortunately, there were many moving parts that led us to not getting to that point. The powers that be decided that there was this opportunity for the working class to rise again, and they decided that we must stop it by any means necessary, which they did, and that includes the person that our good friend is running for Congress against right now. You know, Debbie Wasserman Schultz may be one of many within the cog of the equation of the things that go on Capitol Hill, but she is particularly egregious in everything that is going on right now. After all these years, she's still in the thick of it. She is still out there doing what she's doing and standing side by side with Bibi Netanyahu, which we'll address later. He's been charged as a war criminal. Not a surprise, he is one. But she's going to stand right there with him. And the only thing that's standing in the way, in my opinion, of some semblance of a change that we desperately need right now is going to come from our friend who is running for Congress. And you are here to see. We're going to air it for the first time on our channel. It's been released on social media a little while ago. This is Jen's first official campaign ad. So I hope you guys enjoy it if you haven't seen it yet. I think it was extremely well done. And I think it's really to the heart of the matter of what's going on right now.
This is me at 16 years old in Israel on a high school trip holding an assault rifle. And this is the definition of indoctrination. I grew up in North Miami Beach. I grew up in a very insulated, very Jewish community. We were taught that Palestine and Palestinians, that's not a real thing, that was made up by Arabs. Everybody over there that wasn't Jewish was just Arabs. But the message was always clear that Jews were not safe and that the Arabs wanted to hurt us. My relatives, my great-grandmother, my grandmother were raised with this fear mentality that without the state of Israel, Jews around the world will not be safe. True history was kept from us. We were propagandized. But as I grew older, I began to see a different reality unfolding. I witnessed the rise of the Israeli lobby, exerting its influence on our politics and policies. I learned about the injustices happening thousands of miles away in the name of Jewish people. And I can't stay silent in the face of such injustice. The right to return denied to so many Palestinians. The war fueled by the Israeli government and sanctioned by our own country, condemned by the UN and the International Court of Justice as genocide. We cannot turn a blind eye to this injustice any longer. To me, atonement is really taking accountability for your participation in something that you now realize was not correct in some way and wronged people in some way. I participated in an ethnic cleansing state. I do not feel powerless. I feel hopeful. It is time for us to use our voices, to stand in solidarity with the oppressed, to demand accountability from our leaders. As a candidate, as a mother, as an ally, I pledge to fight for justice and equity for everyone, here at home and abroad. For there can be no peace without true justice. I'm Jen Perlman. I'm running for Congress Florida's 25th district.
That's how you do an ad. That's pretty fucking good.
Yeah, I mean that was powerful. I mean, as I'm sure some I haven't been checking just yet, but I'm sure some people maybe angrily in the chat now. No, I have to take 501c3 restrictions very seriously, so I'll be careful about what I say about the ad. But like, it's a very powerful one. Like, I can't remember seeing something like that ever, like for my lifetime. And so again, that goes to the point we were saying that this is a terrifying moment, but something's changing here where, even saying that for any ad or even saying it in public, would kind of get you really ridiculed. I mean, it still does, but I mean, like, again, it's just another sign that, like the time of monsters does not mean that we have to all just lie down in fear. Right. I mean, there's a great way to look at this historical juncture like this, where you have like issues like Israel, the Israel lobby, like being addressed so forthrightly and in fact, like at the forefront of our political discourse. Like, that is such a sign of a changing time. But it's a very terrifying time. And I remember watching the great Quaker activist George Lakey give a talk here in Baltimore a couple months ago. And he had a great way of talking about this because he's a lifelong community organizer. He's been through some stuff, right? But he says that, like, in moments like these, it's easy to get scared, where it feels like, everything's so intense and the forces of evil are really mounting. Again, the things that Jen's like, speaking to in that ad, the things that you guys talk about on this show, and the things that we try to cover in the real news. Like, yeah, there's real shit going on right now that we need to tackle head on. And that looks different for so many of us. But there's something we can all do to get involved. But what George Lakey would say is that, yeah, like, rather than be terrified by the extremes that we're all seeing and cowering in fear from them, think of it like a furnace, right? And that it's when the metal is at its hottest that you can bend it, right? So what this means, what all this noise, what all this death, what all this terror, what all this fear, what all this, like rising intense situational crap that we got to confront, like, means is that we've got a moment to fight for our future. We've got a chance to try to fight for a different outcome than the one we know we're going to get if we do nothing. And like, that's a terrifying and exhilarating place to be. And so, like, the fact that, yeah, Jen's out there running, there are candidates out there, there are folks, students out there, like, occupying their campuses and getting brutally repressed, getting doxxed, having their lives and their futures put at risk to take a stand. I mean, that action is happening all over the place. And the question for all of us is, what role do we want to play in it? Like, what happens next depends on what we all do now. And as I say all the time in the real news, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And so whatever it is, go do something. That
is exceptionally well said. And that, I think, is something that I think a lot of people are afraid to, perhaps reach out and say, look, I don't know what I am capable of doing, but I want to do something. I want to help in some way. Jen's campaign against Wasserman Schultz is just one of a number of things that's going on right now, but they're all relevant. And I definitely agree with you. What's going on in the campuses really says a lot. What it really says in so many ways to me is they really think the powers that be, and listen, it's no fault of their own. The powers that be know the score and have known the score for a long time. We've seen protests in the past. We know that for the most part, these things just go away. What's going on in Gaza, this is not going away. They can try to sweep this under the rug. And of course, they are probably thrilled to no end that this is happening right now at the end of the school year and not at the beginning. So they just think that these kids are just going to go away. But there is summer school. There are things that go on. I really think we're in an inflection point in our nation's history, maybe in global history. This is a very unique moment right now. It's very different than anything I've ever felt before. It's even more different than 9/11, and 9/11 was very intense. It was very intense, but I got to tell you, I thought that 9/11, the feeling that surrounded it was over the second the talk of going into Iraq started. I said, oh, well, anything that I thought I assumed was what this was all about, that was all bullshit, just like everything else. But this is very real because I think because we've reached a point, the country was a completely different place. I mean, listen, we were heading in the wrong direction back in 2001, 2002. There's no question we were already, but nothing like this. This is on a whole other level. People can't afford to live. People can't afford to buy a home. People can't afford to grow within an industry. I often say, you know, the worst part about RFK's independent presidential run is that he's right about maybe the most significant issue that's going on right now in terms of domestic economics. BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, private equity, the biggest giants in the world, they're going to own over 60% of the single-family homes in this country. And no one is sounding the alarm, and he's the only one talking about this. How's anybody ever going to build generational wealth? It's never going to happen. And I've stayed in one of those invitation homes. Let me tell you, you don't want to be a renter forever. You rent until you can own, but you learn, you nurture, you do I'm in commercial real estate. I tell people all the time, this is a stepping stone. This isn't for life. That's not what it's supposed to be. That's why I won't do business with those big, you know, blockades, if you will, because that's what they are. But that is just one of many. And to think that it's all coming crashing down all at one time. I don't know how we're getting out of this. But I still believe in the indelible human spirit that we will fight our way out of it. It's just going to get really ugly before it gets better. It's already getting really ugly. I just hope we have some signs of life. And I think what Jen is doing is showing some signs of life that we desperately need right now.
Oh man, again, like I think one of the greatest lessons that I've learned from doing the work that I do is a lesson that I didn't know when I was, again, 12 years ago, when I was like a temp warehouse worker in Southern California, as the Great Recession was toppling, you know, families like mine, and we lost our home, you know, in that. And I really saw how the system worked. And I remember sitting on the couch in our home that we were going to lose, that we knew we were going to lose. After a 12, 13, 14-hour shift, I'm drenched in sweat. I can barely move. I'm sore as hell. And I'm sitting there with my family watching the news talk about an economic recovery that apparently didn't include us, right? And just I'll never forget that feeling of how forgotten, how left behind, how embarrassed and ashamed that we all felt to be told by our media, by our politicians, like, you know, that the country meant this and it did not mean us and what we were going through. And like in that moment, I did not know that there were other options. Just like at work, I did not know there were options beyond quitting and finding another job or staying and taking the crap. Right. I mean, what inspires me so much about the folks that I report on and that we report on at The Real News is that there are people who are out there refusing to just lay down and accept their circumstances. And there are folks who are just as human as you or I, who have like all the same character flaws and all the same beautiful traits and plenty of the ugly ones. We're all messy people doing our best to get by. We're all living life for the first time, just doing our best, you know, and like, but these people that I talk to, you know, in sandwich shops in Seattle or Starbucks stores across the country, Amazon warehouses or Home Depot, you know, warehouses, or people in the massage therapy, like, you know, yoga instructors, grad students, undocumented demolition workers, like anywhere and everywhere, someone stands up and says no and fights back and refuses to just be the roadkill of life, like flattened and squashed over by forces that just happen to us. The people throughout history and in our present day who are taking that brave step to say, I will not only be a victim of my circumstances, but I will fight to change, not that capitalist fantasy of like, oh, I'm gonna get out of this and fight and like create a nice little like life for myself. It's like people taking that step to say, no, this system is fucked. Like there's something wrong here. And like, it's not good enough. And we are going to work together.
And that's different. That is a lot different than any other time that I've ever heard people complain before. That is the thing that they are so desperate to prevent from happening. It is so much easier when you could just say it's Trump or it's the Dems or the fact that it seems like especially majority of working people are starting to basically say, no, it's a system that's broken and we got to break it in half and turn it into something else. That is unlike anything I've ever experienced in my lifetime. And Lord knows we haven't seen anything of that sort since the Great Depression, in the sense that, people often say that FDR saved America. No, FDR saved capitalism, because he was willing to maneuver in a way that prolonged what was a clearly broken system then, and just put, listen, he didn't put a Band-Aid on it. He put a massive, gouge wrap on it, and it protected it for, a few decades. But eventually it was going to fall apart, and it did. And it fell apart in a big way. And so as we do wind down the conversation, we obviously have to address the elephant in the room, although I will say a very intelligent one. We're obviously great admirers of Chris Hedges. He's been on the show. He's done fantastic work. But as you have noted, as you and I have talked, and now you can share here, and I believe that he has his tweet. We'll put it up. This is what he had to say. So he said, I was just informed by Max Alvarez, the editor-in-chief of Real News, that they will no longer run my show. The reason for cancellation, he said, is that my critiques of Biden, especially for the genocide in Gaza, jeopardizes his nonprofit status. My last show with Dennis Kucinich, who was running as an independent for Congress in Ohio, was removed from the site. So that's what he had to say. I am sure, as the day is long, that there is a lot more to it than just that. It always is. Please, by all means, share your thoughts, because there is always two sides to every story.
Well, you throw up, just to let folks know, I put out a statement, 2 weeks ago. In terms of what happened, it's in the goddamn statement. Really, the nuts thing about all this past 2 weeks is I'm like, what story are we talking about here? I remember the conversation I had with Chris. It was very short and amicable. Neither of us wanted to be having it, but we were always good colleagues and comrades. And that was the tenor of our last conversation, was look, man, we're at that point that you and I have discussed. As the election goes on, you are going to have to be free to say what's in your heart about Biden, Trump, the election, how people should vote. It is a moral and political duty that Chris feels he has. I respect that. I honor that. I'm also the editor-in-chief of a nonprofit newsroom, and that is the one etched in stone rule that we cannot violate. It's also baked into our Real News journalistic code of ethics, because, it's important for folks to be out there using their powerful voice like Chris does in that way. Again, I'm not censoring anybody. That's why I released the show back to him, was go say what you got to say. I don't want you to feel censored here, but I got to look out for our nonprofit status and our journalistic mission. This is what we're about. And going out and talking about those things is not journalism. So go do it somewhere else. And there wasn't any bad blood. It was we've treated the show as well as we could. We've treated Chris as well as we could for 2 years. We produced a lot of great work together. We built
fantastic.
What I thought was really great, a great friendship we had shown through how we treated Chris and his work, how much we cared for it, and how much, it was part of our collective mission that we are all trying to serve at the Real News, because the Real News is much bigger than Chris Hedges. And then, this we had to have this discussion. It really wasn't, again, long. I had, witness in the room with me. It was something that Chris and I had addressed as a possibility many times before. And we left by saying yeah, come finish out your recordings. Let's go out to lunch. Let's talk about helping get the show on another platform. Again, it was never our show to cancel. It was a show that Chris runs through Substack. That's where all of his money comes from. That's why all the episodes have always been there from the beginning. That was our agreement. It wasn't our show only. We were a co-production partner, but we are still publishing it on our channel, on our website, and we are still a nonprofit newsroom. So the entire arrangement that we had was if there, happen to be episodes where we are getting very dangerously close to crossing that 501c3 rail or violating our journalistic code of ethics, and we can't, edit the piece because Chris might see any edits as censorship, then there's only one thing to do, is just go let the show be itself, and don't have it be restricted to, the journalistic and, tax status requirements of a nonprofit newsroom. So that was the conversation. As well, if I can just finish this part.
Sure.
It was like, yeah, like let's like we want to keep you as a comrade. We know how important the show is, and like we know you're going to keep it going, but like, you know, let us help find another spot for it and like have a great sort of transition. And then like 2 hours later, he throws me under the bus and puts up that tweet and that statement that like really misrepresented the entire conversation, really gave people a very misrepresentative view of our conversation and of my reasons for, you know, like no longer being the co-production and publishing partner of the Chris Hedges network. And like then for the rest of the time, I was dealing with a bunch of like hearsay and like people arguing about a version of the story that doesn't exist. It only exists in like the internet rumor mill. And I'm kind of my head spinning because I was like, what plane of reality are we on? Like, again, I know the conversation I had with Chris. I know the relationship I've had with Chris. And now suddenly I'm getting talked about like I'm some sort of like Netanyahu loving genocider. Like when I'm like, that's what really gets me, man, is like the way that Chris put that in the statement and the things that he said there. And this is all I'll say about it, because like we got no ill will towards Chris. Like, I mean, like we didn't then, we don't now. Like we wish him all the best. I really feel bad that this is how, you know, he wanted to, you know, like, yeah, kick us on his way out when we had shown him nothing but grace. But like, you know, that's his prerogative. He got a lot of Substack subscriptions about it, but I like know who I am, what I'm about, what I said, and the work that we do speaks for itself. That's why so many people did not buy into like this version of you know, that the impression that they got from Chris's statement that like I somehow, you know, fired Chris Hedges and canceled the show and censored Chris Hedges because you know, like of Gaza, and we were going to stop doing Gaza coverage. And I was like, in what world is that true? Like we've been covering Gaza, Israel, and Palestine since the beginning of the Real News, like long before Hedges was even part of our team, long before I was even there. You've had Mark Steiner on the show. Mark's been talking about that for decades. And so it just makes me really sad to realize that, you know, the work that we do at the Real News, that the team that I thought Chris was a part of, apparently all that work mattered so little to him that he could comfortably say and believe, and a lot of his, you know, subscribers could believe that somehow like we had a problem with the Gaza coverage and that we were going to stop doing it, and that was why I canceled the show. And I was like, well, no, again, the day that Chris and I had that conversation, I hosted the Student Intifada live stream on our channel where we brought together students like, you know, from different encampments. Like we published an incredible on the ground documentary from the West Bank like a couple days later. Like we are in this, like we have been in this. Our work shows how in this we are. And I won't stand for, you know, people like, you know, like people can say whatever they want about me. I'm a grown man. I can take it. I know who the fuck I am and what I'm about. And I lead with my actions. I lead with my principles, and I do it as consistently as I can. And I'm grateful that so many people over the past 2 weeks heard this version of reality and they said, no, that doesn't sound like the person in the outlet I know, and like looked at all the evidence and made the decision for themselves. But again, the point that just really hurts is that, yeah, apparently all that great work that I thought we were all doing as part of a team mattered so little to Chris that he could say that he was the only one doing Gaza coverage like this, and that's why I canceled it. Again, that was not the case at all, which is disprovable by just looking at the goddamn website. I also never fired Chris Hedges because he was never an employee. All of his money comes from Substack. He like that was the whole arrangement with producing the show, was like we could be the studio that elevates the show to a video show, and we get to publish it on our platform, and you know, it's part of our like production process, all that good stuff. But it was Chris's show. His money comes from Substack. All the episodes, past and present, are on Substack. So it was never within my power to censor the show or rip a show and keep it from public view. That's why we like the arrangement so much. But again, for whatever, I won't speak to Chris's reasons for saying what he said and handling it the way he has. I sure as hell won't speak to the reasons of any outlet or Twitter personality or YouTube channel that just ran with his version of the story without even doing the basic journalistic due diligence of asking me about it, or citing the statement that we put out. Like, those are the kind of things that, again, they suck. They're unfortunate. They really fucking, you know, like mess with you emotionally, but you got to like, you know, stand by your principles, and you got to lead and act with integrity. And that's what we tried to do with everything we do. We try to do journalism with integrity. We try to treat our people with integrity. That included Chris. And we make the decisions that we've got to make. I make the decisions that I've got to make so that we can execute our mission and help the people out there that we're trying to help while maintaining our journalistic code of ethics and making sure that we are first and foremost journalists who are offering our journalism to the movement to try to help people win a better world. Like, that's the long and short of it. And yeah, frankly, I got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. Folks in East Palestine still need help. The genocide's still going on. Like, we're going to get back to work, and we look forward to, folks coming back, checking us out. Thank you to all the folks who stood by us and didn't believe all the BS and could see through the fog of all the, grifters and whatever, people who just saw an opportunity to juice their own subscriber numbers and, whatever, instead of caring about the truth. Like, that was a very unfortunate thing to see happen. But I think one of the more fortunate things was to see how few people that actually affected outside of small circles on Twitter and YouTube, like how little that matters to the students at the encampments we're trying to talk to and cover, how little that shit matters to the workers, like the auto workers that we're talking to who are trying to unionize, trying to enforce their union contracts, the folks in East Palestine, the working communities here in East Baltimore that are being poisoned. Like, if I saw any of the folks who know us, know me, know our work, know what we're about, if I saw them getting affected by this, I'd be worried. But I don't. Right. And so I'm not. And so, again, I'm sorry Chris feels this way. I'm sorry folks, feel the way that they do. What I said was very simple. It's what I told you now. Like, it's what's in the statement. Everything else that got blown out to YouTube la la land. Like, I don't even know where to begin with that. Like, again, I know the conversation I had.
That's also a sad reflection on what is considered the edge left, or whatever you want to call it. Because for them, it is all about the clicks. It's all about, how many different ways that they can, like you said, juice the numbers, because for them, it is a career. I don't play into that. I do this because I care. I wouldn't have enough to live on anyway. I could probably buy a few sandwiches here and there, but that's Jen knows every once in a while I got to get myself a dinner. But outside of that, look, Jen doesn't do this anymore because there is a conflict of interest. She cannot be a congressional federal candidate and be doing a podcast and profiting or raising money through it at the same time. It doesn't work that way. Can't do that. Then on the same token, there are these, sort of crossover issues that happen whenever you're doing any type of a story. And I think a good example of that was, I think Chris is a brilliant mind, but he doesn't have every answer. He decided he was going to attempt to run for Congress in New Jersey, if you remember a couple of years ago, as a Green Party candidate. And that didn't go anywhere, thinking that that was the way to do it. Well, listen, I believe in growing the outside the two-party system, obviously. But if you have no infrastructure, especially in a state like New Jersey, and you attempt to do that, you're going to fall flat on your face. I know you think that was like there's enough gravitas with his name and that he could have done something. That is one thing that I think a lot of people in the online community have a very hard time coming to the realization of. Most people don't pay attention to this stuff. They don't know anything about what's going on right now. There's a lot of people who don't even know that Chris is not on the team anymore. And to me, that is a reflection of just this insulated world that we live in. Are potentially, a couple thousand people going to see this show? That's great. In the grand scheme of things, that's nothing. It's nice, but doesn't really do anything. It doesn't necessarily change the narrative in any way. It just matters that we respect the fact that there are going to be differences. The one thing that the left has a very big habit of doing is constantly cutting each other down. That is the long and the short of it. We see it all the time. And I don't have any time to play into that. I am not going to change my opinion of Chris Hedges. I am not going to change my opinion of Max Alvarez. Business is business. There are certain lines that can be crossed, certain lines that can't be crossed. If there's anything that you want to have final thoughts touch on as far as if there were, again, like you said, this is a fine line, but if there was any story in particular that he was pushing that you basically said, look, we can't go this route. This is not going to work. It's going to affect, Nina Turner has a great saying. She says, I am on the left, but I didn't take a vow of poverty. And that is something that a lot of people tend to forget, that this is how you make your living. And it's one thing if you were catering to the establishment But I think it's safe to say that the Real News Network doesn't do that. Now, are there times where there could be this line that if you cross, they're going to basically bring the freaking hammer down? Yes. That's why Jen isn't on the show. We don't need that problem. We just avoid it. So is there anything that you could give the audience who are clamoring for it? You're not telling us enough. Is there anything that you could tell them where you could say, look, this is where we went our separate ways and it is what it is?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, and again, I appreciate it. Like, and I hope folks out there watching who genuinely want to hear the answer to that question will appreciate and understand, like, why, like, I had to, put out the statement. I've given follow-ups to folks who have asked about it. But the more like ridiculous and out of like whack and self-serving like this discourse became, the more like, in fact, it was, like not in anyone's interest to start like, getting in the mud and flinging shit. Even given all the terrible things people are saying about me, again, like we are here as a nonprofit news organization that focuses on reporting from the grassroots of struggle because we believe that people are being hurt across the world by many different sources, and they are going to be the source of the solution. And so we try to be there talking to folks about what they're going through and talking to them and their communities and their unions and their, social justice movements about what we can do to fix this place, right? I mean, like that is the bread and butter of what we do. We're not some evil, like horny, like a outcrop of like the Democratic Party or the Netanyahu government. Like again, like just
unlike some people we know that pretend like they're not. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, like I think like there's just what I'm really stressing here is like again, just see who the guy and think about like the world that I live in. I go to a like building downtown that like was effectively donated to the Real News like 15 years ago and like get to do this work. But like, we're not CNN, we're not, NBC, like we're like a medium-sized little multimedia outfit that's trying to do the most good with what we've got. Right. And so I'm not out here to censor anybody. Like I'm not out here to like, try to like steer the movement or whatever in some way. Like, so the more that people's like questions are coming from like those radical misconceptions of everything I am and stand for, like I hope you'll understand for my own mental health and for like the good of my org, like I'm not going to waste my time on that shit. Right. Again, I know the conversation that I had. I know how I run my org. I know how I work with our team. Right. And Chris knows that too. And, I stand by that. The people that we work with know that. And I stand by it. The people we report on and for know who I am, know who we are, know what we're about. And we stand by that. So we stand by our reputation. We stand by, like our identity as journalists with a heart, journalists with perspective, journalists who still like have all the same reasons that everyone else does for wanting to stop this capitalist nightmare from destroying our planet and everything we love dear, right? So that's who we are. That's the kind of organization that I'm working with. That's the mission that I was charged with carrying out and running that, type of organization, like to a certain strict, like and principled set of editorial standards and codes of ethics. That everyone on our team has bought into that from the beginning, but it's also like an essential part of like the functioning of our org, especially when it comes to things like our nonprofit status, our tax exempt status. Like what I want to share with folks is not only just that sort of like humanizing, like just think about this in real terms, not like, the weird YouTube, internet or Twitter like terms, like just the real bread and butter reality of what we're dealing with here. That's the same like perspective I would like ask folks to sort of take the conversation that I had with Chris Hedges. Like, I think where some of the confusion was that, folks look at the Dennis Kucinich interview, and Chris himself has suggested in that statement that the Kucinich interview was somehow like the landmine that he stepped on that we had to like cancel the show over. Again, that I did not say that in the statement for a reason. I did not say that in my conversation with Chris for a reason, because I did not make the decision I did based on the Kucinich interview. The Kucinich interview was just a example of the larger problem that Chris and I had talked about many times and that we knew was going to come to a head the further down the gullet we go into this election season. The Kucinich interview was a great interview. I'm glad it's out there on his Substack. That was our arrangement. If there's something that nonprofit wise, journalistic code of ethics wise, we can't have on our channel. You still get it on the Substack. Everyone gets access to it. Win-win, right? That it was one of those scenarios, but the discussion that it prompted was a discussion that, again, we had many times before. Chris himself had acknowledged this as a possibility many times before, that as the election goes on and as shit keeps getting worse and as all the topics that Chris and we are covering, like continue to be sort of like connected to the question of what's going to happen in the election, he's going to need to be out there saying what he's got to say and what he feels is in his heart. And so I released the show back to him so he could do that in the most comradely way I could, with nothing but, like the best of will, nothing but gratitude for the 2 years that we had working together, nothing but hope that we could still be comrades who understood that the media industry is like a real pain in the ass. And Chris knows that more than anyone, but hopefully dealing with the realities of the industry that we're in, the missions that we're serving, the jobs that we're in, doesn't mean that we aren't kindred spirits on the same side of an important struggle. That's still how I feel, even after everything that we went through. I wish him all the best. I'm sorry that he feels that way. I'm sorry that he felt that he had to torch me and our team and our work's reputation on his way out. But I'm glad again to see that, the what is it, like the national anthem says, it's like the flag's still standing, man, because again, people know us, they know what we're about, and they know that we are committed to, like you said, like we gotta get to work. Like this is unfortunate, but I hope this means that Chris has the ability to elevate his powerful voice beyond, like what he was able to do even with us, like have the impact he wants to have, like be free to say what he has to say. We're over here executing our mission, like on the journalism side, trying to help like the same people, like achieve the same kind of change. Like we can walk and chew gum. We can all be parts of this movement in different realms. If it doesn't work that we can't all work together at the same place, that doesn't mean that the movement's falling apart or that we're all awful people. That's just fucking life.
But according to some people on social media and especially on YouTube, Jimmy, they want to believe that it's only going to get worse. But remember, your work speaks for itself, especially what you do on the ground, especially for labor. And for me, that's more than enough. For others, maybe not so much, but that's on them. For me, you want to use the word comrade? I just use it as you're a brother in arms. So is Chris. We have to continue to work on what we can work on and move forward, and that is the bottom line. Before you go, one shot opportunity. Plug your book that's coming out, please.
Well, the book is still in process, but I will be going to other sacrifice zones this year to interview working people living in, like, God, it's going to be a really intense book, but I think really important. I'm also like, for folks who can't wait for that, like go check out my podcast, Working People, our work at The Real News, because I'm already putting out these interviews. Again, I interviewed folks in East Palestine all last year. I'm still talking to them. But that led me to interview, Vina Colley, a union electrician who worked at the Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant in 1980 and has been fighting that company and the government and the Department of Energy that have been giving that entire community cancer for 40 years. And now that led me back to, again, South Baltimore, Cancer Alley in Louisiana, so on and so forth. So this is, if you want to check out my show Working People, but normally you listen to it and normally you come to it for like kind of contemporary labor union struggles or shop floor struggles, that'll still be part of the show, but I'm going to have more of my Real News homies helping me fill that out. So we got a really incredible team that's covering a lot of different and important issues, from the grassroots, from the first person stories of the people living directly in the middle of the shit and fighting for a better world. That's where we are with our microphones and cameras. And so if you want to hear more about the Sacrifice Zone series that I'm working on, it'll be on the podcast. I've put out a number of episodes already on that. Check us out at therealnews.com. Don't believe all the BS that you hear about us. Just go check out our work. Again, people can say whatever they want. Go watch our work, and then you'll know who we are. Talk to anyone who works with us and you'll know who we are. But please check us out, because it is important work and we are dedicated to it, and we do believe it can help make a difference. So if you want to, be part of the real news and help us get to the grassroots of struggle, lift these stories up, give people the sort of, platforms and power that they need to be the change that they're waiting for. Check us out at therealnews.com/donate, subscribe on our YouTube channel. Check us out on the podcast feed. And yeah, thanks for having me back on, brother.
Always appreciate it, my friend. Have a great evening. Keep kicking ass and taking names. And guys, subscribe, like, and share the Real News Network. Max Alvarez, always a pleasure, brother.
Solidarity, man.
Have a good night. So for anybody that has issues with how things unfolded, look, it is what it is. I think Chris Hedges is fantastic, but I also think that everyone has their blind spots and everyone is going to say things that they're going to say that isn't completely in line with everything that they may have interpreted or what may have ultimately gone down. Look, like I said, there's a fine line that certain things will and will not be allowed to say. There's a difference between potentially going into territory that is going to cause you to lose what you've put together versus starting to talk about things like, Joe Biden's not so bad. Maybe we should reelect him again. Even though he thinks that Netanyahu's not a war criminal and the ICC is out of their mind. See, now, if they started talking like that shit, then you know you've got a problem. But I will say this, and Got Milk brought it up, and that is true. See, the problem with Comrade Jimmy, like a lot of other channels that are out there, it's not really a question of whether or not, the issues at bar are not important. They are, and in many cases, they get them right. But there's also something to be said for when what you're doing is strictly, first and foremost, based on profit. And if the decisions you make in terms of the stories you cover and how you cover them are based on, is this going to get me 1,000 views or is it going to get me 100,000 views? And if the thought process is to go into that, then what you have is not something that's based on integrity, but it's based on money. It's based on compensation. And that is not to say that compensation isn't important, but if you're good at what you do, eventually the truth will work itself out. That's how this works. The Real News Network does really solid work. And even though they're going to take a little bit of a hit, there's no question that they are. And obviously Max has taken a hit as a result of that. You could tell he was very upset, and it really gets to him. Again, it's just like, this is his life. This is how he makes a living. And so it is understandable that there is an issue at bar here when it comes to what can and can you not cover. And I truly feel for him in that regard. But I will say this. If you have any doubt as to how deep this runs, yeah, it's true. It's always editorial. And I definitely agree, Travers. Hedges' scope is definitely more global. Max's is definitely more on the ground and local. And you have to make these things blend. But like I said, nothing is ever going to be perfect. And on the left, as we've learned again, the working left, not the woke left, not that crap. We're talking about the nuts and bolts of the labor movement. It is not easy to come by. But what I will say is that if you have any doubt that there aren't reasons to be concerned about what's going on out there right now, there are many reasons to be concerned. And for those of you who have been paying attention, the Zionist movement is as volatile and as detrimental as anything that you will see. And one of the things that Jen talked about in her ad, which is important to note here, is the indoctrination that comes to the forefront when you are brought up in a Zionist culture. Now, no better example of that than the reaction that these students, these Zionist students at, I believe, a middle school, I want to say, in Tel Aviv, and this just happened the other day. So have a look at how students react when they try to get their teacher, who is Palestinian or Jordanian, fired. Yeah, it's a cult. It really is. And the thing you notice also about these kids is that, I mean, listen, are some of them Sephardic or some of them Middle Eastern? Sure, but most of them are Ashkenazi, European. They're not from the region, but this is colonization. This is what happens. You basically create this environment where it is ostensibly okay to be as bigoted and as supremacist as you can possibly be. And that is what the Zionist movement effectively is. And while our president is attempting to endear himself to again, this is why he goes to Morehouse College in Georgia. So to suggest that he has to go there. And why? Why would he feel the need that he has to go there? Because he's got to collect votes. He's got to preach. But you know what? That preaching ain't working. Going up there and saying the things that he's going to say, babbling on about how it's not that big of a deal. It's not a genocide. Everything's fine. This is normal behavior. It's not. But the president really has a propensity to just really stick his foot in his mouth, like really, really badly. So we're going to show you what he said and then how I believe the valedictorian responded.
This is one of the hardest, most complicated problems in the world, and there's nothing easy about it.
That's not true. It's not complicated. It's a genocide, and you're aiding and abetting it, and you are next. Maybe that's why he came out today and said, I don't think there's anything war criminal-ish about the Netanyahu. He's perfectly fine with what he's doing. Well, if they could charge Netanyahu with being a war criminal, they may charge the president of the United States as an accomplice to that genocide. They could technically, just saying.
I know it angers and frustrates many of you, including my family. But most of all, I know it breaks your heart. It breaks mine as well. Leadership is about fighting through the most intractable problems. It's about challenging anger, frustration, and heartbreak to find a solution. It's about doing what you believe is right, even when it's hard and lonely.
So, in other words, aiding and abetting a genocide, which you're doing. But those are the tough decisions one has to think about. To genocide or not to genocide. Really tough. Really tough.
You're all future leaders, every one of you graduating today. And that's not hyperbole. You're future leaders, all of you. You'll face complicated, tough moments. In these moments, you'll listen to others. But you'll have to decide, guided by knowledge, conviction, principle, and your own moral compass. The desire to know what freedom is, what it can be, is the heart and soul of why this college was founded in the first place.
I think he wanted an applause line there and he didn't get it. Sorry, Joe, no go.
That a free nation is born in the hearts of men, spellbound by freedom. That's the magic of Morehouse. That's the magic of America.
Well, if that's what he thinks the magic of America is, and he just kind of draws the words together. Oh man, tough kind of thing. Freedom and concept. And I can see, I think I could, I cannot with his eyes half, with like just this slit. I can see, but I can't see. I'm going to tell you, freedom, prosperity, big words. I got the best words, kind of like Donald. But of course, I'm back. That's not all of it. There's more. You see, valedictorian had a few choice words for the President of the United States.
My stance as a Morehouse man, nay, as a human being.
First of all, can I just point out, and I think it's fair to point this out, guys, and again, I am not doing this to go after him in any way that's trying to compound all of the issues that are already there with our current president. But just look how hapless and decrepit he looks. It is so pathetic that they are trying to get this man to run for president again. What they're telling you right now, at this very moment, is that this man in the lower right-hand corner of your screen is capable of being the leader of the free world for almost 5 more years. This is so beyond elder abuse. This is basically telling you that we don't care about anything that the working people of this country want or need. We are willing to sink this country straight to hell because it is a broken system, and we are going to get every last scrap that we can get our hands on before it all goes away. What else is there? There is no other explanation. It is obvious to me, and I mean this, and I don't mean this to be insensitive or inconsiderate, but I don't believe President Biden will be alive in 5 years. I just don't. And I have a right to believe that. And I think a lot of others do too. Continue.
To call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
What the hell are you clapping for? What is he clapping for? This is unreal. Clap, Mr. Pratt. That's a good kid right there. My God. My God, he claps. Well, what else could he do?
Hear the people of this world. Sing the song of righteous justice. Thank you.
It takes a lot of courage to do that. Will he, as Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank would say, he is now under permanent surveillance, and anything he attempts to do in terms of his career may set him back several years. Now, who knows? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. What I do know is that courage under fire is where you're really tested. And he is courage under fire. He didn't just say ceasefire. He said it in front of the President of the United States. But part of the reason he's able to do this is because he's doing it at a black college. They wouldn't dare, for political purposes, even attempt to hiss. You know, when they go into places like, Jerry Seinfeld's stand-up comedy act bullshit where they say free Gaza, and you hear the proud Zionists in the crowd going, hiss, hiss at people like snakes, because that's what they are. They wouldn't do that at a place like Morehouse College, because this is an HBCU. And for the Democratic establishment, they can't mess with this block of voter because they know they need it. Well, guess what? They need the Muslim voter too. And the Muslim vote is probably going to decide the election in at least Michigan. Know your power, know where it stands, and use it. They need you more than you need them. And the gentleman who gave this speech understood the game, and he played it well. Bravo. So as we wrap up the night, I do want to cover one last thing, which is important. Now, as I mentioned at the top, I mentioned in the middle, and now mentioned at the end, this does have a lot to do with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. We all know that she is the bane of my existence and many others. But if you would be so kind, Colin, please pull up Debbie's tweet regarding the ICC charging Netanyahu with war crimes, basically saying he should be in The Hague. Now, a lot of members of the GOP came out today and said, I definitely don't agree with this decision made by the ICC. They don't care about Israel and da, 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 da. I'm just a stupid robot, AIPAC money-taking corporate shill, like so many in the GOP are. Now, you didn't see as much of this when it came to the Democratic Party. Old, reliable Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Oh, she had something to say. She definitely had something to say. And the amazing thing about her statement isn't so much that it's about protecting Netanyahu. Oh, no, it goes deeper than that. And by the way, rocking the shirt. Rocking this baby. So, Colin, if you've got that, I don't recall if it's her. I don't recall if it's her personal or her congressional. I want to. I mean, you could check either one. I mean, I could check it now if you need me to. But the statement was absolutely appalling.
I found her website statement here.
No. There's a tweet. There's a tweet that she put out this morning regarding this statement.
Oh, found it.
Okay. So Wasserman Schultz doesn't equate it to just Netanyahu. It's there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. So now she is taking the Zionist AIPAC talking point to the furthest extent that you can possibly take it. And that becomes Netanyahu is Israel. There is no distinction, just like there is no distinction in her eyes between Zionism and Judaism, which is why she was at the forefront of the amendment that got passed in Congress declaring it is such that Zionism and Judaism are one and the same. Now, what makes this even worse is the fact that she is blending it all into one. So Netanyahu and Israel, they are one. There is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. Equating a democratic state, Israel is not a democratic state. It's a colony. Period. With a terror group that rapes, murders, delights in acts of genocide. You see, it's amazing. Everything's backwards with her. Everything's backwards. All the things that she's saying right here, equating a democratic state with a terror group that rapes, murders, delights in acts of genocide. Is she talking about the IDF? Because it sure sounds like it. I know she'll say she isn't. This is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. It's like verbatim, it's word for word exactly what the IDF does. There are countless cases of people that have come out and said that they've been raped by the IDF. They are clearly murderers. We've seen the footage. We've seen what they've done in hospitals of all places. And delight in acts of genocide. We've seen the signs on the wall that says Nakba 2024. And maximizes civilian deaths, demonstrates the ICC's gaping, what a choice of words, moral failure. No other nation is held to this standard. Up is down, left is right, and I'm nuts and she's sane. This is our Congresswoman. And she's been here for 20 years, going on 22. I have made it my personal mission for several years that this person needs to be unseated from power. I hope we can do it. But this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with somebody who literally sees things or expresses a viewpoint that is the complete opposite of reality. No one here is saying that Hamas is without its fault. It is, clearly. But what she is saying, clear as day, everything she just said is verbatim what the IDF has been doing. There is no equivalence. She's still in power. If this enrages you as much as it enrages me, get active and get involved. I can't tell you where to go. I can't tell you what to do because I'm not going to get this channel in trouble. I'm not going to get the campaign in trouble. But do what you have to do. You probably all do already. As far as I'm concerned, you want to play this game? You want to really show your anger and go down this path of defending all that is wretched about what's going on? That is what this is. That to me says it all, and it always has. As I've often felt when it comes to this representative, if you want to see the ad, please, I'm tired. If you want to see the ad again, I highly recommend that you go to our social media channels. They are there, and we will make a clip. I promise. Final thought. I don't think I can blow this. Oh, wait, can I? I can't blow it up any more than I can. But you get the idea. That's a war criminal, a genocidal maniac of a war criminal, and Bibi Netanyahu. Sorry, had to do that. Had to do it. He's a war criminal, and she is an accomplice to genocide. I have absolutely no hesitation, no problem whatsoever in calling my congressional representative, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, an accomplice to genocide. She is. She proudly stands with Bibi, and that is why she put out that statement today. That is why she spent 2 weeks in Tel Aviv with him. That is why she does what she does. She is going to die on that Zionist hill. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. I don't know. But if you care at all about this, get involved. There's many ways that you can. But this is what stands between us and putting to bed a lot of things that have been in the back of our collective labor-centered working minds for many, many years. If you want this to end, we can end it, but it's going to take a monumental effort for us to do it. And it's time. It's time. I gave impressions a little earlier, Tony. You just missed them. Did them with Max. I did Bill. I did Bernie. So Couldn't have said it better, Andrew. Tony, Henry, Ghislaine, Jay Boggs, Travers, Carne Verde, Jay Bogues, Self-Care Maven, Henry Kajawa, Sam Stan, Got Milk, Carol Cutino, I think I said Colanello, good to see you. Steve Grossman, Checks WV. I always don't know what they actually mean, so you'd never know. So you always want to be sure, and that's why you ask. Jimmy Zimzam, Donald James. Oh, it's been a lively chat tonight. You guys have been great. And I think I said Tony D, but I'll say it again. Great to see you as always. All of you guys who contributed. Mario. All my people. All you guys have been great. Remember what I said about contributing. You can do it, but I prefer you do it elsewhere. And again, take with that what you will. We will have a show Thursday night. I am pretty sure I'm going to be here with my good friend, Osiris from Middle MAGA. So another mix-up. We're having every type of person come on this show. That's what we want. And I believe next Monday night, we're going to have Mr. On top of everything Israel-Palestine related, Greg Stoker. He's coming. That's next Monday night. Let me see if there's any. Schultze, good to have you here. Jennifer Perlman, excuse me. Good to have you here, Jennifer. And I think that, is it still a spoon? I've always loved that part. Always have. It's a great part of the Matrix. Is it still a spoon? Alex Ventura, I believe you're new. Great to have you. DJ Royalty, great to see you. Sandra Looney, haven't seen you in a while. Great to have you. Sable. I think that just about covers it all. Mark J, thank you again. And Mark J with the statement. You two are dynamite. Truth. The average American has some 90 toxic industrial chemicals in his or her body. A lot of that's microplastics. Don't forget that. 160 such chemicals are in the environment. And it's true. That's why I try to stay as healthy as I can, but even that, I'm sure, is not nearly enough. Well, I want to control the population somewhere. And of course, firmware, always great to have you. And your support is tremendously appreciated, as it is by all of you guys. Any and all support that is provided, whether it is to like, share, comment, subscribe, get the word out there to any and all people that you can. And one more time to Tony, thank you for your 4-month subscription as a YouTube member. It really means a lot. All the support that you guys provide is tremendously important, and it does make our channel go. You guys have all been great. And so with that said, we've got a lot of very important stuff coming up. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things that we ask you to do, as we will always ask you to do, because this is how we maintain some semblance of a working class revolution as best we can. We'll see you Thursday.